Microphone test. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Day 1 Founders Academy. My name is Gordon Doherty. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Mic check. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome. Grab some coffee, take a seat. We're going to get started. Welcome to day 2. Who came yesterday? Lots of people? Did you go to the happy hour? Any after parties or too early in the week? Too early in the week. Okay. Well, good morning. Welcome to the entrepreneurship track at Austin Tech Week. Woohoo, yeah. My name is Elisa Sepulveda. I'm a VP of Startup Banking at JP Morgan Chase. Been in this ecosystem for a while. It's great to see some new and familiar faces, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. Austin has long been a city where creativity meets courage. Today, we're celebrating that spirit of founders who build, break, and bet on themselves. Please join me in kicking off today with Kumar Vinakota with Cole Shots, our track sponsor.
Thank you, Elise. So the track sponsor is a trial attorney in federal court. You're probably wondering, why am I up here? Raise your hand if you think you are disruptive. Okay. Keep your hand up if you have a good lawyer. Okay. The ones that put their hand down, are you really disruptive? Look, first of all, welcome everyone. This is probably 2 years ago was when I last started sponsoring. This used to be called Austin Startup Week. I used to have my own baby law firm in Dallas and loved coming here. And part of the reason why I came here was on the trial side of representing tech companies like yourself and seeing all the pitfalls. And what really happened was at the beginning, right here at this stage, were you protected properly? And so I came down from Dallas. I have some of my colleagues from New Jersey and even in Austin. We're gonna have a panel later today to talk about the do's and don'ts and what we've seen in the legal side of what you innovators and entrepreneurs are gonna do. So again, it's a real honor for us to be here. We look forward to talking and meeting with everyone. And then, by the way, for the record, I went to UT Law, but I am an Aggie. So Gigamags, and welcome again, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. In my former life, I was a VC, and I will agree, you really need a good lawyer, especially early on. So keep that in mind. All right, we're going to get started with our first session. It is Founders Academy, establishing a solid foundation. We're joined by someone who's helped shape the startup ecosystem as we know it here in Austin. Please join me in welcoming Gordon Doherty, best-selling author, veteran startup founder, and co-founder of Capital Factory. With over 500 startup investments and decades of executive experience, Gordon's here to help you build your foundation right. Let's give him a big Austin welcome.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, today is going to be a great day for me, not just because I get to spend time with you, but about 20 minutes ago, my middle daughter messaged me that she's going into the early stages of labor with my fourth grandson. Sorry, my fourth grandchild, second grandson. So anyway, this is going to be a great day for me. I'm going to do my best to put my focus on you and not on that. So you heard a little bit about my bio. Maybe it's in the program. Maybe you and I know each other. Maybe you've read some things about me. It is true that I've made more than 500 or 600 investments as a venture capitalist with Capital Factory. It's true that I've advised, I don't know how many thousands of startups over the long period of time, but really it's my 28-year career in tech before co-founding Capital Factory, where I bring most of my experience that I'm going to talk about today. About half of those 28 years were in Fortune 500s, big tech companies, and the other half was in startups and early stage high growth chaos. We took a company public. We sold another one to a Fortune 500. We crashed one into the side of a mountain in a ball of flames. And so really it's the stories that I have, the mistakes I've made, the battle scars all over my body, the gray in my hair that's standing in front of you today. I don't have an Ivy League MBA. I never worked for an investment bank. So really you can say I'm a layman that's speaking from successes and failures. Today is first day of Founders Academy. I recognize a couple familiar faces. I can tell some of you have already been through my Founders Academy that I do outside of Austin Tech Week. First day is on fundamentals, foundation, things that every founder needs to know. And then tomorrow we're going to take some of the concepts that we're discussing today and we're going to parlay that into a full session on fundraising, okay? So hopefully you'll be able to join me for both days. At the end of this session, I won't be able to stay here at the stage because in 15 minutes there's another session. So I'm going to, as briskly as I can, make my way outside into the lobby area right there. So if y'all have some questions, for me, I can stick around for a bit. I will pause at the end of each of the 3 lectures. I can take 2 or 3 or 5 questions, depends on how we're tracking on time. It's only 9:58 instead of 10 o'clock, so that's pretty good. We're already 2 minutes ahead of time. But I do want you to know, just because of time and trying to optimize to get my 3 lectures in, we'll only be able to take 2 or 3 or 4 questions at the end of each lecture, and then I'm going to step outside and I can take more questions. Fair enough? All right, let's go. I want to start with idea development because this is kind of like the first thing that should happen. As founders, we're taught or we read, move fast and break things. And we think that might mean there needs to be 0 planning before we just start putting our hands on the keyboard or soldering iron. But it's much like, let's say, building a house. You wouldn't just go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of lumber and start framing the house. You'd probably do some planning ahead of time. And so the concept of idea development really is to assess the viability of your business plan as much as possible up front before you start hammering nails into 2x4s, okay? Before you put your hands on the keyboard or soldering iron. And this is because pivots made early, pivots actually even made before you get started, are amazingly valuable. When you have to pivot after you already have customers or after you've already raised some funding, it can be really painful. If it's a significant pivot, it could kill the company, and you've wasted time, you've wasted money. So we really would like to assess the viability of our business up front, if possible. Since I'm talking about viability, we're trying to assess the viability, I want to put it in context of a business life cycle. Every business pretty much has to go through this life cycle from left to right, with one exception that I'll describe. First, we want to validate that our business idea is desirable. Do people want it? Do people want to solve the problem that you're solving? Not just want it, actually, do they desperately need to solve the problem? If so, then the next thing we want to validate is feasibility. Can we build the thing that solves the problem that desperately needs to be solved? If so, then you are one of the fortunate ones that can then focus your energy on viability. And I define viability as a company whose lifetime value of a customer is significantly greater than the cost, the average cost to acquire that same customer. You see 2 greater than signs there, and it's not a typo. This is because if the lifetime value of a customer just barely exceeded the cost to acquire the customer, then we wouldn't have that leftover profit or that leftover lifetime value needed to pay for all the other functions of the company that aren't just customer acquisition, okay? And if we can reach a viable company, then congratulations, like you really become one of those small percentage that get to focus on the next exciting stages, which is scalability and sustainability. Scalable, how big can you grow? Sustainable, how long can you last? It does happen that a startup that is viable would become sustainable, but not scalable. It's the startup that could reach $5 or $10 million in annual revenue, profitable enough to sustain, but it just turns out to one of those ventures that can't become really big. And that's okay. A viable and sustainable company that doesn't get really big can be an amazing company. Super happy customers, employees that love working for the company, and a great culture. So that can be a great company. But in my world of venture investing, we look for companies that can be both scalable and potentially sustainable, okay? So viability is really important. How do we figure out ahead of time if what we're working on is viable? I wrote an article titled, "Your First Business Plan is a Huge List of Assumptions." You know, in the coffee shop, when either you by yourself or you with a prospective co-founder are riffing on your idea and you're writing it on a napkin, because every first business plan is supposed to be on a napkin so you can frame it later. Yeah, that napkin, what you're writing on there, most likely a majority, if not all of the statements you write on that napkin are assumptions. They're things you believe are true. And so if that's the case, why not really write them down. Don't just stop there. What are all of the assumptions that you are making at time equals 0 in order for your company to be viable, at least viable, and potentially scalable and sustainable? And so, if you struggle with writing this list or you don't know how to phrase it, just use my trick of starting each statement with, I believe, or we believe. And what is it you believe to be true? And some of those assumption statements, some of those we believe statements are going to relate to the problem you solve, the audience you'll serve, the alternatives they have for solving that problem, how you might monetize, how you might acquire customers, the team you'll build, blah, 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 blah. It's every chapter of the business plan probably deserves a handful or more assumption statements. Now, if we have this list of assumption statements, first off, if you see me a week from now here at Capital Factory and you say, hey, Gordon, I did that list and I got like 12 amazing questions, you probably won't see a big grin on my face and you definitely won't get a high five, because I get excited when it's a much longer list. I'm really trying to get coverage across the business plan. So if you tell me you have 40 assumption statements, now I start to get more excited. If you say 60, I go, wow, you really got coverage of the business plan. So now if we have 40, 50, 60 assumption statements, we can pop those in a spreadsheet and we can group them. We can filter them a couple different ways. One column might say chapter of the business plan, which assumptions relate to problem, market, competition, business model, etc. Right? That's cool. You could sort and just kind of geek out a little bit on just the assumptions you're making for a certain category. The other column could be how significant or how important is the assumption that it's true. See, not all assumptions are of equal importance. There's going to be some number that are critical. If it turns out they are not true, not only do you need to pivot, you might need to create a whole new company. Some of them will be kind of minor and not that big of a deal. So you could sort the spreadsheet a different way that brings all the critical assumptions towards the top. And you're going to see now, we're going to parlay all of this into some customer discovery, where you're going to get out and you're going to go talk to prospective users or customers of your product. You're going to go talk to that target that you assume is your ideal target. You're going to interview them. And as you interview them, the questions you ask probably should center most around the critical assumptions you're making, right? You want to disqualify those as quick as possible. If they're not going to be true, you want to learn that as quick as possible. So this list of assumptions should inform the interviewing you do of prospective customers. And then when you get out there and talk to them, the questions you ask should be open-ended. And for any of you that have been through sales training before, you know what open-ended questions are. They're questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. And so the way you ask the question can inject bias. If you ask a closed-ended question like, isn't it a royal pain in the ass when, and then you finish, like you're leading the customer, and they could say yes or no. Instead, you say, how do you go about doing this, right? Tell me about a time when this happened. You can even say could you show me that? Wow, that's amazing. Do you have just a minute to show me? And this is open-ended questioning where you will get more honest responses. If you inject your bias into the questions, it's too easy for you to hear what you want to hear, not the truth. The only thing that matters is the truth, okay? And if you're fortunate, you will discover after these interviews and maybe some adjustments. After the first 3 or 4 interviews, you might have already invalidated some of the items on that list, and you need to make some changes into new assumptions that hopefully will be true, and you take it back out. So through a couple of iterations on this, hopefully you'll find that you're solving not just a want to solve problem, but a top 3 pain in the ass must solve problem. okay? This is especially a statement for those of you that sell to businesses. Consumers is not, selling mobile apps to consumers is not my specialty, so I can't speak from experience there. I can speak from experience that when you sell to businesses, if you're not solving a top 3 pain in the ass problem, you will not get them to spend money on you. They have a list of 30 problems they would be interested in solving, but at any given point in time, there's only 3 that are really keeping them awake at night. It gets almost all of their attention, and therefore it gets their budget. For those in the back, we've got some amazing chairs right up here. Come on up. Come on up. If y'all were interested, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, really come get comfortable. So this is what you're looking for. Not just, am I solving a problem that deserves to be solved? Am I solving a problem that's a top 3 pain in the ass problem that I can get customers to open up their checkbook and pay for? Too many founders think the bar is here, solve a problem. Nope, the bar is here. And you will suffer immense pain and agony if you are solving a top 8 problem. It possibly deserves to be solved, just not now. So I want to take you through a quick case study that will carry through a little bit more in another lecture, and then also tomorrow. It's a story about Doggy Drone, enabling dog ownership for disabled senior citizens. I want to introduce you to Luella. She's in her mid-70s. She lives at home alone after her husband passed away some years ago. She's lonely, sometimes a little depressed, but let's say she's mostly healthy for being in her mid-70s. In her annual checkup with her family doctor, she learned that owning a dog could actually help her in terms of overall wellness, lower her stress and anxiety just a little bit, could help control the periodic blood pressure issues that she has. And so Luella thinks about, hey, what about owning a dog? But what's going to happen if and when Luella reaches an age or reaches a medical condition that she can no longer walk her dog, Sunny? And so I invented Doggy Drone, which is a drone that's going to walk Luella's dog for her. She gets to select the distance and the route that Sunny walks, gets to see real-time video to make sure everything's kind of cool and okay. And she gets an alert about 2 minutes before Sunny's going to arrive back at home so she can have his favorite treat ready with the door open. Okay? Do you understand Doggy Drone now? Used to be a ridiculous idea until a few years ago where this product was on display at the CES conference. So I have to come up with a replacement. I'm thinking about an autonomous baby stroller to replace Doggy Drone. But I'm kind of nervous that somebody's going to do that too. And actually there is one called Ellie, I think it's called. It's an autonomous baby stroller. I won't be buying that for my daughter. So what can we validate with Doggy Drone? If we could write a whole list of assumptions, do disabled seniors wish to own a dog if they could take care of it? I hope so. In addition to the dog walking solution, what other issues would Luella have that might prevent her from owning a dog? She has to feed the dog, she has to take it to the vet. There's a variety of issues with owning a dog, so this is the necessary but not sufficient problem. You could solve one of the critical items for Luella owning a dog, but if she doesn't have a way of taking the dog to the vet, you ain't selling your Doggy Drone to Luella. You understand that? So you need to understand the totality of the situation. What alternatives did she try in the past, if she has, or considered? The neighbor kid, they were too unreliable. That dog walking service, it was too expensive, whatever, okay? Are disabled seniors willing to have a drone walk their dog? This is kind of the demographic thing. Would somebody in their mid-70s trust a drone to walk their dog? It's a brilliant technical solution, but maybe they wouldn't do that. Another demographic question, is this a male versus female thing? Is there any difference? So demographics could be an interesting thing that you discover. Customer segments, size of companies, all that kind of stuff. So I think this list could go on and on about Doggy Drone. You got to get out of the office. You have to get off of your phone. This is not send a Survey Monkey or Poll Daddy survey to 1,000 prospects that match your target audience and have them complete a form and do a numerical score. It is possible you will do that to supplement your real qualitative research that you do by getting out and talking to customers. I'll have founders tell me that, yeah, I sold to quick serve restaurants. My real customer is the general manager because they're the real decision maker. Gordon, I can't get to any general managers to do an interview with me. My response is, then just shut down the company and find something else. Are you telling me it's too hard? Because I'm telling you what you need to do is go talk to general managers of quick serve restaurants. And if you can't figure out how to get scrappy enough to make that happen, I'm sorry, your company's just going to fail miserably for a bunch of other reasons. Can you get to a shift manager? Can you interview them? Can you excite them enough that they sponsor you into a 10-minute conversation with the general manager? So I reject any attempt to describe why you cannot do, because if you can't do the customer discovery, you can't do the sales to your first 10 customers either, okay? Don't just thank them for their time and walk away, exchange a business card. Repeat back to them what you believe you learned and observed. Your bias might be able to get corrected when you do that. No, Gordon. I know that's what you heard. What I really was saying, okay? And then you can ask them if they want to be a beta tester. It's amazing, okay? That's idea development, okay? Hopefully pretty straightforward. Hopefully there's an aha moment in there or two. Hopefully each of you have an idea that you can implement. We're doing pretty good on time. If we're a little lucky, I'm going to have 5 or 10 minutes at the end of this to really open it up for questions. Is there anything y'all desperately need to ask me now before we move to the next lecture? Any questions? I'm happy to take one if you got one. All right. Yes?
Sorry. I get a microphone.
Hey.
I don't have to project. So I had a question, and it goes back to that life cycle diagram that you showed at the very
The
beginning.
life cycle?
Mm-hmm. So when a company or somebody has an idea and they're starting to seek fundraising at like that idea pre-viable kind of stage, why wouldn't you wait until you know your idea is viable and if it's going to go sustainable or scalable versus seeking that funding upright, because that feels like a risk to me, versus knowing that your business is either going to go one of two ways into the future?
Thank you. So this combines the life cycle of the startup before viability was the question, and fundraising. And tomorrow we will dive into fundraising even more. So I want to answer the question, but I want you to know I'm going to pile on quite a bit to this tomorrow. Startups only raise money for one of two reasons. They either want the money or they need the money. I know it sounds simple. Those of you that have kids have probably taught them the difference between want and need, right? Most startups raise money because they need the money. Their bank account is approaching zero, and if they don't refill the bank account and it goes to zero, they have to pack up their toys and go home. Some of them are fortunate enough to raise money because they want the money. They want to accelerate things. You're describing before you've validated, or as much as you can, validated viability of your business. If you're working on a medical device, an advanced humanoid robot, et cetera, you have no choice but to raise money really early before you've had, let's say, a sufficient opportunity to validate the viability of the business plan. You're still back in the proving that the science even works. You're in that feasibility stage. And unfortunately, for those types of startups versus software startups, they have no choice but to raise money in the early stage. It's also possible that there might be a software startup that, for whatever reason, desperately needs the money. Some of you can bootstrap through that prototype development phase, let's say at least. Usually when we get to a prototype for a software company, we might open up to some angel investors investing, and with a prototype, you've probably been able to get some customers to poke and prod on it, and you have a decent sense there. But not all of you could bootstrap for the needed 4 to 6 or 9 months to get to that stage, and so you might be in a situation where you need the funding, but because you can't be one of those bootstrappers. But it's an individual decision, but I do come back to the want versus need. For me, my preference would be to delay that funding as late as reasonably possible, but without giving, let's say, some competitors an advantage that decide to go quick and go big. Thank you for the question. All right, let's move to elevator pitch now. Let's say you've got a mostly validated business plan, and you've been working on the product some, and you are getting to this point where you might be within a few months of raising funding, or you're seeking some business partners. Actually, even you're hiring some employees, some executives. One of the first things you should do is develop a killer elevator pitch. And there's a couple different versions of an elevator pitch. One might be where you stand on this stage and you're given 1 minute to pitch your company. Okay, that's kind of elevator pitchy. It's not a full pitch where you get 4 or 5 or 10 minutes. So we might call that 1 minute thing an elevator pitch. But I'm going even to a further extreme, to the short 8 to 10 second elevator pitch. Because the articles that I've written on this topic relate to this research that was done, that when us humans are not engaged in a task, our attention span's about 8 seconds, right? And in the new age of, apps and phones and things and multitasking, I don't know if Dr. Formica did this research again, we might find that it's 5 seconds. But let's just give ourselves 8 to 10 seconds. It really is kind of the elevator analogy, isn't it? If we hopped onto the elevator on the first floor here in this building, and you and I were both going to the 16th floor, it probably takes about 8 seconds, maybe 10. No stops. We're just going to go from floor 1 to floor 16. So if we see each other on the ground floor, like, hey, didn't you go to Founders Academy? Like, yeah, I did, Gordon. I'm impressed that you remember that. I say, oh, well, what are you working on? Like, oh, I'm working on Doggy Drone. And I say, as the doors close, what's Doggy Drone? Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, 8 to 10 seconds. What are you going to tell me? That's the elevator pitch. That's this version of the elevator pitch. You got 8 to 10 seconds to tell me what Doggy Drone is. To do it in such a way that when the doors open on the 16th floor and the last word comes out of your mouth, I do one of two things. I wish you luck and go to the bathroom or the coffee machine, or I step out of the elevator and pivot to the side because I want to ask you a question. Do you see the dramatic? It's so binary, isn't it? Good luck, bathroom, pivot, question. So the article, one of them that I wrote, is titled, "Your Elevator Pitch Only Needs to Accomplish One Thing." Just get a damn question. I mostly don't care what the question is. It could be, how do you spell Doggy Drone? 1 word or 2? And you get to answer the question and then add the next sentence or 2 that you really wanted to say if you had been afforded a little bit more time and the elevator was going to the 50th floor instead of the 16th. Hopefully it's an even better question than that, like, whoa, a dog that walks your drone, drone that walks your dog, how heavy dogs can it handle? And you get to say, up to 25 pounds, and blah, 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 blah. So you realize any question lets you continue that dialogue with your prospective COO that you're going to add to the team, an angel investor, or whatever. It's really important to me. An elevator pitch will not get you funded by itself. It could lead to a question that leads to a short 2-minute dialogue that leads to a business card exchange or phone tap that results in a coffee. Enough of those, one of those unlocks funding. So do you see how it can be the door opener? So they're either going to the bathroom or they're going to ask you a question. If they ask you a question and enough times that happens, now we're playing the odds that 5% of them are going to lead to a coffee and 20% of those are going to lead to a whatever. Okay? So for a killer elevator pitch, I like to combine in 8 to 10 seconds what we do and why someone should care. There needs to be kind of this, we're a drone that walks your dog. Okay, now I kind of know what you do. Why should someone care? Okay? And usually it's the why someone that should care part of the elevator pitch that generates the question. Not always. And so this is usually crafted into 2 sentences. I've just found that 8 to 10 seconds, you can't, 4 sentences you can't recite in 8 to 10 seconds unless each sentence has like 3 words. So I'm kind of thinking 2 sentences for the most part. So I have an article with a framework on how to maybe go about structuring this. We don't have time to do that today, but you can, when I talk about an article I've written that, if you all don't know my website, it's shockwaveinnovations.com, shockwaveinnovations.com. So when I say I wrote an article on that, all you have to do is, if you do a search for the word elevator, you're going to see my 1 or 2 articles in my video on elevator pitch, okay? So instead, I'm just going to jump to a couple examples that might be in this 8 to 10 seconds. This is one for Shockwave Innovations. We help educate and advise startup founders so they can build great companies. In fact, one startup that we helped in the early days, they reached 80 million in revenue and did a NASDAQ IPO. So 2 sentences, yep, that probably came out of my mouth in 8 seconds or so. And hopefully, when the elevator doors open, you want to ask me something like, well, hey, who was the startup? What did they do? When was that? What was their IPO valuation? Hey, Gordon, did you have any equity? How much money did you make? Like, I hope you want to ask me something about that startup, okay? It's probably the second sentence versus the first one that's going to trigger your question. Sensei, I'll be with them a little bit later today. They're one of our portfolio founders. I'm on their board of directors. They understand from your eyes what's going on in your brain. And with a standard cell phone camera, they can diagnose mental health disorders starting with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. What? Hopefully you desperately want to ask me a question about this, right? Cell phone camera, how long's the test? What's the accuracy of it? Will doctors' offices have this, or is it going to be when I go to the optometrist for my annual eye exam and it's built into one of the machines? How much does it cost? Is it FDA approved? When's it going to be FDA approved? What are they going to do after those 3 mental health disorders, right? Hopefully you desperately want to ask me a question so I can continue the dialogue. Doggy Drone's an amazing dog walking solution for the elderly. Our drones have already completed 20,000 walks for more than 250 elderly and deserving dog owners. Now, this is one where, in the early days, or really any of these, actually think of Sensei. They don't even have a single customer yet. So I'll have founders that tell me, God, Gordon, I can't really come up with an amazing elevator pitch because we haven't even launched our product. Well, great, either has Sensei. That sounded like a pretty badass elevator pitch to me. Don't you want to ask me a question and give me like $1 million to help solve part of the mental health crisis that we have around the world? Yeah, so, wherever you are, you just craft the best what we do and why someone should care. And then when you have something else amazing that happened to your startup, the second sentence, might change, One thing not to do. Don't describe how you do it. That's the answer to a question. Don't say, we're a cloud-based AI startup that uses blah, 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 machine learning, VRL 123 XYZ to, by the time you get all that, I'm like, bah, not interested, got to go to the bathroom. Don't start your elevator pitch with, we're an AI software company that uses hosted XYZ 123. No, that's what you care about. The person you're talking to could give a crap about how you do it at that very moment. We're solving the mental health crisis by giving you a number for your mental health, just like you do for your blood cholesterol. Did I say anything about AI? Did I say it? No, when you say, how on earth do you do that? I get to talk to you about the 3,000 muscle fibers in your iris and how a cell phone camera trained on that can detect the minuscule movements and the change in size and shape to your pupil, and then machine learning can match that with people that are known to have depression and known not to have depression, and it can give you a number with 90% accuracy. Do you see, if I started with all this, if I start with the stuff about the 3,000 muscle fibers and AI and blah, 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 technically it's interesting. Isn't it better just to say we're solving the mental health crisis by giving you a number for mental health just like you do for blah, blah, blah? Okay? So those of you that see me early tomorrow and you want to practice your elevator pitch, I love doing it, but I wanted to suggest what not to do. Okay? Does that help? Once you get one that you think's pretty good, you got to take it out for a test drive, because in your brain it's perfect. Take it out there. Find 20 people that you can practice it on. It's okay if they know you, they just shouldn't know too much about what you're working on, because if they know what you're working on, it's not going to be this kind of serendipitous, get on the elevator, hey, who are you? Oh, I'm founder of Doggy Drone. What does Doggy Drone do? It won't be like that. So you need it to be as kind of native and original as possible. So, hey, I'd love to test my elevator pitch out on you. I'm going to tell you about a couple sentences, and then I want you to react just with the first question that comes to your mind. Doggy Drone, da-da-da-da-da. And then you pause, and you see what question. They ask you a question. Don't answer their question, but instead then say, okay, hang on, pause on the question. What do you think Doggy Drone does? With just those two, what do you think Sensei does? And then let them answer what they think your company does. They won't get it perfect, probably, but are they in the right zone, or are they way, way over here, right? If they're way over here, it's not a disaster. As long as you get a question, you can get them back in the zone. But it's better if, oh, wow, sounds like this is like a software medical device for mental health. Like, that's interesting. Yeah, you're in the zone, okay? Probably what's going to happen after your second or third or fifth test, you're going to realize, I need to adjust and adapt. Fine. Don't keep going with 20. Make some adjustments. Take it back out to 2 or 3 or 4. Make another tweak. You're probably going to tweak 2, 3, 4 times until the question you get is actually a better question than the first time. Any question is okay, but there's a list of questions that actually are a lot better, aren't there? And then they're going to be in the zone for what you do. Then, after you're done with that, if you have other members of your team, they can be volunteers, they could be interns, they could be advisors that have a little equity, they could be your first angel investors, so they don't have to be, quote, employees. Everybody learns and memorizes the elevator pitch. You went through all of this effort to craft it. You went through all of this effort to validate and fine-tune it. Why on earth would other stakeholders in your company wing it with their own description? Because what's going to happen is your co-founder or your advisor, when I see them, hey, Rudy, what are you working on these days? Oh, I'm working with this cool startup named Doggy Drone. And I ask Rudy, hey, what does Doggy Drone do? If Rudy starts with, oh, they're this AI software company with hosted blah, 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 and they use machine learning XYZ, fail. So your advisor just got a fail and didn't get a question. I went to the bathroom instead after riding up the elevator with Rudy. Why would you risk that? So with my companies, once we got the right elevator pitch, I sat everybody down. Hey, huddle up. This is the pitch. You got it? Let's practice it. Everybody say it. And then some other random time, some number of weeks later, when we're kind of huddling up on some other crisis, right in the middle, hey, pause. Megan, what's our elevator pitch? And if Megan kind of fumbles it, I say, I was serious when I said, like, this is the pitch. All these stakeholders of yours, aren't they going to happy hours? Aren't they going to meetups? Aren't they hanging out here at Capital Factory and talking to other founders? I hope so. They should be spreading the word using the exact same elevator pitch until something happens to your company and you refine it and it becomes better. And then we tweak the elevator pitch. Can you tell how important this is to me? I'm telling you, do you know how many times I get interrupted in the hallway from a founder that I've never met? Just this morning, I did go to the bathroom 20 minutes before we started. On the way back, I got stopped 4 times. 4 times. Short interactions. Do you think in my brain there might be 1 out of the 4 that I remember because that quick dialogue got right to the like, oh my gosh, you're working on what? That's interesting. My email address is, versus the other 4 that, that's, interesting, nice to meet you. I really hope you enjoy Founders Academy. Thanks for coming to Capital Factory. Okay? You see the difference? I'm telling you, 4 times from bathroom to coming back into the store, I got interrupted. This is the real deal. Okay? Any questions on that? I've got article, I've got a lot more on this if you really want to kind of dig in. Yes, sir. Not right now. Thank you. No, I want to hear it. So when I'm done, I'm walking outside, I want to hear your elevator pitch. I really do. Run to the front of the line. And if for some reason the line is 50 long and you get blocked out, I'll be here 30 minutes early tomorrow. And if we don't meet today, practice it on a couple. See if you can get it into the killer range if it's not already. Yes, sir.
So if the follow-up is not a question, sorry.
Go ahead.
After the elevator pitch, if the follow-up is not a question, but it's, tell me more, what should be the leading, like what should be next?
I love it. Thank you. It's not a question. It's, wow, that's interesting. Tell me a little more about that. That's like a home run, right? Because now you have an open canvas. When I ask you a question, you have to you can't be a politician, right? You know, politicians, they get asked a question and they answer something totally different and they never answer this question. That'll just frustrate people. So when you get a question, you kind of have to answer the question and then maybe you can pivot or expand it into some areas. So as you're planning this out, like what I would have on a piece of paper is, I'm probably going to get questions about how does it work, blah, blah, blah. You can anticipate some questions. And after you've done this 20 times, you already know some of the more common questions. So you will learn how to answer the question. If it's a great question, you just stay in that lane and you expand on it and then you let them keep going. If it's not a great question, you know the most relevant topic. You want to answer the question and then kind of In fact, would you believe that it gives you an actual number and it's blah, 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 right? So this is the market. This is how marketing and salespeople move. And so if you do that exercise, it's based on how to pivot from a question to, a better topic. I believe that's the same canvas for somebody that says, wow, well, tell me more. You already know the 3 or 4 things that you would love. If you get a chance to say a little more, you'll know exactly what to say. Yeah. This has a question, and then I'll take one more, and then we'll finish our last lecture. Here comes the microphone.
My question is actually a comment about that last question.
Thank you.
If you get the wonderful question, tell me more, or statement, tell me more, make it about them. Turn around to them and find out what they're interested in. Well, do you have a dog? Do you have a grandma? Do you have a grandma with a dog? And without being too much of a politician, but if you can get them to tell you something about their problem, that's where you're actually skipping 3 steps almost towards a sale at that point.
Yeah.
So tell me more is an invitation to ask them why they are interested in it, because they're very interested.
This is brilliant. The reason it's brilliant is because every salesperson is taught to start every conversation with questions. You never sit down in front of a prospect and start spewing your sales pitch. You always start with questions so that then as you start talking, you're relating what you talk about to, what they described. And so this gentleman is exactly correct. There's a way that you could ask a question that will then let you, because some people are technical geeks. They want to kind of go down this technical path. Others aren't technical at all. They're more on the, and so you would have the risk of going and geeking out on how the machine learning models work and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, that wasn't very interesting. So thank you for the comment. Thank you. All right, one more question here, and then I'm going to move to the next one. And we'll see if we have a minute to open up at the end. Yeah.
So if you're building out a technology and a social movement with the goal of federal reform at the end of it, what would your advice be on an elevator pitch? Because I'm trying out a few this week, and I've been meeting with a few pre-seed investors, and I'm just trying to find the pocket of what works, even though we have this kind of big goal, and we're both a technology company and a cultural policy initiative.
Yep. Thank you. I'm going to answer the question in a way that might apply broadly. I appreciate yours. It sounds like it has some social impact, but then the ultimate goal would lead to change in legislature, change in policy, change in whatever. Your choices sometimes with this, where there are a couple different ultimate goals, one would be to start with the kind of first thing you're doing and the impact it would have. So having this social impact, if that resonates and generates a question like, yeah, that sounds really interesting, but oh my gosh, isn't there a lot of policy around that? Yes, as a matter of fact, the second phase of our business plan is blah, right? So sometimes we want to start with the intermediate goal, problem solved, or objective, and our elevator pitch is all around that. And with question or dialogue, we then expand it into something that's even bigger, sometimes a bigger impact. In other cases, you do the opposite. You go straight to the ultimate goal, and they go, oh my gosh, how on earth are you going to like change Impala? That sounds like really, that's going to be crazy difficult. Well, yeah, actually what we're starting with is we're going to do this, okay? So sometimes we start with mid-range, and then with dialogue, we show them what the real big picture is. Other times we have to show them the big picture, and then in the question we come back to, and here's what we're going to do next or first. I don't know if that exactly relates to yours, but for a lot of people, this is the case. Sometimes what you're working on, the first version of the product is going to target kind of a small, we're going to talk about market sizing next, actually, so this is kind of good timing here. The first version of the product, it targets kind of one industry or one use case or one whatever, but then over time, it really gets bigger as it morphs. Do you pitch this first thing that you're doing and then say, but wait, there's more? Or do you pitch the really big one and then say, and here's how we're going to start? There's pros and cons to both. Sometimes when you pitch the really, really big one, the investor's like, oh my God, you're biting off way more than you can chew. Sounds like you're distracted. You're trying to take over the world. You're a fledgling startup trying to raise, $250,000. Come on, get real. So sometimes you have to start with kind of the first one, and they go, that sounds really interesting, but God, that's not a huge market. Yeah, what I didn't tell you is after that, we get to expand it. We're going to take over the whole. Okay, that's interesting. Two different ways to tell the story. 10% of founders have this great dilemma, and I can never predict which is the best way to describe it. You kind of got to get it out there and see the way the investors or others are reacting and take one approach versus the other, okay? All right, so let's size the market. We're pretty much on track. This is really important for those of you that need to get funded, from venture-style investors. If your plan is to, take out a loan with a bank and whatever, yeah, they care that you're solving, a problem. They care that you can become profitable. But this phenomenon of market size is more of a phenomenon for those of you that want to raise money from angel investors, VCs, private equity, et cetera, okay? The reason is the size of your market is going to suggest the upper limit of how big you could become without doing dramatic things. So the business plan as we see it, how big could that be? And part of the reason this is really important is because of the filtering attributes of market share. You can never have 100% market share of a market. If you do, you've basically defined your market so narrowly that you're the only one. Well, and if that's the case, it's probably going to be a small market, and that's not what you want anyway. So, if your total available market is $10 billion, if you could capture 2% share of that $10 billion market, you'd be a $200 million company. Well, guess what? $200 million companies can often be valued at $1 billion. You could get that famed unicorn valuation, possibly. But if your total available market's only $250 million, which $250 million is not a small number, but you'd have to get 80% market share of that market to be the same $200 million company. And most of us know it's really difficult to get 80% share of any market, right? And so that's one of the reasons why having a very large market is important to investors, but it's not the only reason. Another reason would be large markets, very large markets, have optionality. I use this analogy of this room with multiple doors. Each door leads to a hallway. Each hallway has multiple rooms. Our market is the door on the left and the hallway and all the rooms inside that hallway, along that hallway. And so if we get down into that market and for some reason it turns out to not be exciting, not near as good, or something bad happens, because this market is large and has optionality, we could walk backwards, come out the door, and go into another door, usually. These super large markets have sub-segments. We segment the markets. And oftentimes you would start within one segment of the market, and if you need to pivot, one of your pivots might be to an adjacent market, and you get to go into another door that has a hallway and multiple rooms. So do you see the advantage of that? You don't crash and burn like you would if this was just a singular market, if there were only one door, and it turns out to not work out, not be kind of what you thought, or something happens, you don't have that optionality. And so investors love large markets, not just because of that market share thing that I just described, but because of the optionality it presents you. And so I could suggest that an ideal market, number one, would be large. It kind of needs to be large to huge, but in addition to that, it would be nice if you could combine one of the following other attributes. Maybe it's growing like this, and so you have the rising tide benefit. Hopefully you'll grow faster than the market, but there's this kind of natural uplift as opposed to the opposite. Maybe it's dynamic. Maybe there's a lot of innovation, a lot of disruption in the market. Markets that are being disrupted create cracks and openings for startups to get a wedge in there. Do you think there's a few markets being disrupted right now because of the two letters A and I? Yeah, like crazy. I mean, startups should be loving it right now. Now, that disruption could disrupt you too, right? So it comes right back on you, but like every industry is being dramatically innovated and disrupted right now. And so startups should be having a heyday on this particular factor, and probably that's going to be an element of your pitch deck. And then available for entry just means hopefully not so concentrated that 2 or 3 vendors dominate like 95% of the market share. Doesn't mean you can't find your wedge in there, but that's more difficult than let's take a different market that in order to get 90% market share, we have to look at a list of 20 or 30 vendors, okay? That would be a fragmented market where there's an opportunity for you to get a wedge. So large in size, and hopefully one or more of these other attributes would be great. You with me so far? Okay, so now you understand the concepts, why it's so important. Let's size 2 different markets, or let's size your market 2 different ways. One is called total available market, TAM. The TAM is how big you would be if you sold your product to every reasonable customer, every reasonable constituent in your broad market, okay? So it's a revenue number, it's a hypothetical number, and I'm gonna give you an example using Doggy Drone, but it's how big you could be if you sold your product to every reasonable constituent. Reasonable means if you have a product that is for the elderly, well, then you can't include infants and toddlers and teenagers in your market size. They're not going to buy this thing because it has to do with those that are on Medicaid, could do both. So there's a whole, so do you see it needs to be a reasonable customer? That's the total available market. The serviceable market is the subset of the total available market that you're able to serve at any given point in time. You can serve it because remember, in the early days, you have limitations. You're not able to address the entire market. You have certain limitations. And so we need to do filtering of your TAM to get the SAM. And what might those filters be? One might be certain geographies around the world that you can't reach. You don't have distributors outside of the US. Okay, so your total available market might assume the day where you're selling and distributing globally. Awesome. But today, you've only got distribution capabilities in the US, so your serviceable market would filter down. Maybe your product is only in English, and so there are certain places around the world that, hey, their English is not good enough to use your product, so we filter them out. Maybe you're a mobile app and it's only available on Android, so you can't count all those iOS smartphones. You see the ideas. These are the more common filters to go from TAM down to SAM. Y'all understand that now? At least the basics? I'm going to show you some examples in just a minute. So because of this, hopefully you're concluding that your TAM won't really change. Your TAM's only going to change as the big market happens to grow. But your serviceable market, man, it might change every 6 months or a year as you remove one of those filters, as you sign the distributor for Europe, as you add Spanish, Italian, German, and French to your product. right? As you add the iOS operating system for your mobile app. Boop. Overnight, your serviceable market just doubled or whatever. So this is a conversation I love to have with founders and that you should love to have with prospective investors. Here's my TAM, here's my SAM. The reason my SAM is so much smaller than my TAM is because geography, language, operating system, industry. Until I get this regulatory certification, I can only whatever, but then once I get that certification, so serviceable market expansion is an amazing theme for fundraising. Hey, Gordon, with this $1 million seed round we're raising, we're going to add French, Italian, German, and Spanish, and we're going to add the iOS operating system, and our serviceable market is going to quadruple. Boom. Investors love to deploy money that dramatically increases the market size. That is one of the reasons that they might enjoy investing money. So do you see the importance there? It's a discussion. This is why sometimes when we talk about the roadmap, it's not just your product roadmap, it's your business roadmap. Show me the evolution of your business over time. And the product is one important swim lane, but there are other things, and one of your swim lanes might be SAM expansion. And when does that happen and why? And how is your funding strategy going to support not just evolution of the product, but evolution of your serviceable market? All right, so you ready to size one for an example? Let's do doggy drone. Let's say I've done some research and I've determined that there's 100 million families globally that have pet dogs. It's probably way, way more than that, but the numbers got so ridiculous I decided to just pretend with me there's only 100 million families around the world that have pet dogs, one or more dogs. See, I know a lot of families have 2 and 3 and 5 dogs, but I'm assuming, trying to be reasonable, that a family with 3 dogs isn't going to buy 3 doggy drones. They're going to buy 1 doggy drone, and they're going to walk 1 dog at a time. I'm just sharing that with you just as an example of an assumption that these are little nuances. Because if I had said, how many pet dogs are there in the world times $500 per doggy drone, the investor's just going to go, wait a minute, are you telling me that if Luella has 3 dogs, Luella's going to buy 3 doggy drones? Come on, Gordon. So as I get that pushback, I'm like, oh, crap, you're right. I should probably only assume 1 drone per family, regardless of the number of dogs. But in this case, my business model involves selling doggy drone for $500, meaning you click the order button, you pay me $500, and I ship you a doggy drone, and you own it, okay? So in that case, the total available market is pretty simple. 100 million times $500, it's a $50 billion market. My TAM is 50 billion. If I sold a doggy drone to every family around the world that owns a dog, 1 or more, I'd be a $50 billion company. I realize it might take me 10 or 20 years to do that. I realize I'm never actually going to sell 100, but this is the way TAM works. You with me? Simple, right? So now let's look at the serviceable market. Sorry, let me back up. If instead of selling doggy drone for $500, if instead you pay me $19 a month for dog walking drone as a service, I would just do it different. 100 million times $19 a month is $1.9 billion per month. Or I'd probably actually convert it into an annual figure. It's not 1.9, it's probably 190 million. Whatever the number is, you could do it on your calculator, do the monthly amount, and then probably multiply it by 12 to tell me my TAM is $2 billion in ARR, annual recurring revenue. So if you're a subscription business, which many, many, many of you are, just express it as your annual TAM. Okay? So how about serviceable? I'm going to use a couple of filters. I only have distribution in the US. In fact, within the US, dog walking drones are only legal in 20 of the states, and the first product is only powerful enough to walk 25-pound or lighter dogs. Otherwise, the dog walks the drone instead of the drone walking the dog. And so let's say that my research says, okay, instead of 100 million, there's 10 million households that meet that filtered criteria. Okay, easy. It's $5 billion. My TAM is 50 billion. My SAM is 5 billion. All right, I already told you this, how if you do a subscription. Okay, how about expanding my serviceable market? Some of this is kind of obvious. Over time, probably more of these states, I'm hoping, are going to pass legislation to allow low-flight drones to walk dogs, because they're actually doing it to deliver your groceries. So, hey, we're gonna kind of just skate behind that legislation, because everybody wants drones to deliver their groceries. I don't know if you really do, but let's pretend people do. So they're going to influence their politicians who are going to allow that. We get to ride on the coattails. It's also going to be able to walk your dog for you. Awesome. In fact, part of the money you raise might be to hire lobbyists in the biggest states that are kind of on the edge of that, so you can maybe push it over. Like, that could be a viable use of funding, because it expands your serviceable market. Now you're selling into Florida and California too. Boom. You got to know that my engineers are working on a second version of Doggy Drone that can handle dogs from 26 to 50 pounds, and then a couple years from now we'll figure out how to do the 50 to 100 pounds, right? We'll charge more for it. We're expanding our serviceable market, aren't we? So you see 3 good examples of serviceable market expansion. That give you a few ideas? I realize you got to do the translation to your business. I'm not saying this is easy. Some of you have excruciatingly difficult markets to size. Some of you have the other problem where actually any consumer in the world could use it, so you could say the population of the world is 5 billion times whatever, and you get this $2 trillion market size. It's like, no, don't do that. So sometimes actually your market size is so inherently massive, you don't actually even need to do this. We're like, yep, I got it. There's a cajillion, whatever. Let's just talk about how do you some of you might be fortunate enough to skip this. Some of you might have extreme difficulty finding the data to size your market. You need to get creative. Can you find some college students that have access to really interesting research that you can't afford to pay for, but since they're a college student, they have a library with every research report made demand, and they can go get all this data? You're going to need to make assumptions. Fine. That's just a discussion to have with investors. Like, how did you come up with 50 billion, Gordon? Oh, well, turns out there's 100 million families. Well, how did you come up with 100 million? Well, I had really good data in these markets. For these, I had to extrapolate based on blah, 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 blah. You just don't hide anything. You're going to need to make some assumptions, probably. This is just a dialogue to have with investors. All right, somebody over here had a question. Yes, sir.
Going back to that 10% thing we were talking about before with the brand vision versus vision, like, is that going back to what you were talking about before in terms of the 10% of companies that end up trying to decide between the grand vision that they're trying to sell and the smaller one. How does that factor into TAM specifically? Because it's something we're struggling with a lot at the moment.
Thank you. Great add-on to that question. Remember, I talked about some of you will have to describe kind of a midpoint thing that you're trying to pursue, and the first 2/3 of your pitch deck is focused on that. And then there's a slide that says, but wait, there's more. After we've conquered that, then we can go after this. In that case, probably what's happening is you're following a normal pitch deck. Problem that you solve is often the first section of the pitch deck. Not always, but usually I like to start with, what problem are you solving? And then next, oftentimes you talk about the market you're serving. Who's the target and how big is it? Other attributes about innovation or disruption. And so in that case, if your approach is start with the midpoint objective and say, but wait, there's more, then the market size is going to be related to the midpoint. And then when you say, but wait, there's more, after this, then part of the next slide is, and that's going to quadruple our total available market. So yeah, in that case, you're going to size the market twice, and however you choose to start to tell the story is going to influence how you reveal the market size information. Yeah. All right, where's the mic? Well, over here, this guy.
Yeah, thank you. When you are defining the market or the ideal customer or user for a product or business, the hardest part is how to define it, right? In a demographic way or psychographic way or both. What is your perspective?
Thank you. What criteria do you use to even size the market? I'm actually just going to go back to the first lecture on the developing your idea. When you went out and you met with your prospective customers or users, what did you discover? And in that discovery, hopefully, you identified your target market, okay? Now, I want to say something about target market. If you go read my article on market sizing, because I go into more detail and I have a whole video and lecture on this as well. This is your TAM. Your SAM is almost always smaller than your TAM. How much smaller? It really depends. And then oftentimes within your serviceable market, there's a market that we call the beachhead or the target market. And this is who you're going to sell to first. Oftentimes, your sales and marketing budget is not large enough to effectively go after all of the serviceable market, and so you might concentrate. Doggy drone, even though dog walking drones are legal in 20 states, I told you, as a fledgling startup, when I first launch it, I only have resellers in Texas. So Texas is my target market, okay? And so then later, and so same thing would happen with demographic, psychographic. Which are you gonna, so they both might be in your serviceable market, and that's fine. But then when we have a discussion about, great, I'm gonna give you your first $500,000 pre-seed funding, how are you gonna use it? Your discussion might say, Gordon, our first target market is demographic based, and we're gonna go after this. And then after we've reached this milestone, then we're gonna raise some more funding so I can go after this psychographic target customer, something like that. Remember, all of this is just a dialogue. A lot of times there's no right or wrong answers. You talking to investors, you're gonna hear their questions, you're gonna hear their concerns. Some of them are gonna love it, some of them are gonna hate it. And you just have to pick what you think is the best path. All right, time for one question, then we gotta flip the room. You decide.
Thanks for that. That was great. It's a lot of good fundamentals.
Thank you.
As the leader of Capital Factory and your ear to the ground, 2 daughters, a couple of granddaughters, and soon to be 2 grandsons.
Thank you.
What's your opinion on AI, the future, and where you put your investment, knowing that 2 or 3 years from now, many of these assumptions that we're making today are going to be complete trash?
Yeah. This is a good one. I'll answer it, gosh, I can answer it 2 ways, but on the Capital Factory side, most of our energy and investments are going into the deep tech category. I mean, like really hard problems to solve, not quick software apps that once AI, is a little bit better, there might be a lot of disruption there. We've moved more into deep tech and dual use technologies that, yes, most of them are deeply embedded or dependent on AI, which is going to evolve, but the problem they're solving are really big problems, and it's going to be a journey. I think the software industry, there's going to be a lot of whipsaw in software. And part of this is just going to be because as the evolution of AI, man, something that was great today is going to be like, that was so yesterday, and this is going to happen so frequently. So a lot of you all are going to disrupt the startups that started 3 to 5 years ahead of you, and then but even you all, you're going to have to look over your shoulders a lot, even as an early stage company, just because it's moving so fast. So I think it's exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of breakouts. I think there's also going to be a lot of carnage. But my most recent article was titled, Building Unicorns Using One and Done Funding. Software startups that are using AI tools not just to write some of their software and increasingly more. I realize, you don't just say run and then post it and let's go, everything's good. But I see where that trend's likely going. I think you'll be able to get a product in the market, software companies, for very, very little investment. I think most software startups will be able to bootstrap to product launch and interesting revenue and then decide when to raise one round of funding. And because of efficiencies and not having to build out an organization of 100 employees to get to $50 million, you get to $100 million with a 10 or 20 employee company and get profitable very quickly. So I'm super excited about all of that. On the personal side, yeah, it's very different. I think about more the good versus bad of AI, because I'm old enough to have been there when we kind of like launched and became familiar with the internet. And there's this kind of 70-30, like 70% of what the internet brought us is pretty freaking amazing. 30% of it, not so much. My 10-year-old granddaughter, if she stole my phone and figured out how to hack through my little password thing, she's like 5 clicks away from maybe seeing things that she shouldn't see. I don't like that, but that's 70-30. And so I just hope with AI that 70-30 is kind of the balance and that it's not 51-49, good to bad. But believe me, I think about this, I obsess a lot with what's going on in AI and can't help but think about it through the lens of my 3 daughters, actually 3 daughters and soon 4 grandkids. So got to stop so they can get ready for the next session. Tomorrow's all fundraising. It's the same time. Yeah, show up. I'm going to try and arrive early. I'll either be hanging out outside for a bit because I don't know when they'll let y'all in. As soon as we can come in, let's geek out on something, okay? Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Gordon. We're going to take a quick 15-minute break, make a new friend, grab a coffee, join us for Launch Smart, how legal can be the rocket fuel for your team in 15 minutes.
Thank you. Oh, here.